My name is Ali, and I'm 25. I know what it looks like, a young girl living with her uncle, and everyone probably imagines it must be strange. But how amazing life is sometimes and how strange its twists and turns can be. My life might have turned out differently if the tragedies that eventually led me to this house, to these people, to this story had happened more than once. When I was only 17, my parents divorced. At first, I didn't realize how seriously their decision would change my life. Moving from city to city, my mom trying to get a new job, schools and friends changed everywhere, and at some point I just stopped getting used to them because I knew I would soon say goodbye again. I held on because my mom was always there for me, but 3 months ago I found out that she was being transferred to Europe for a year, and we both realized that now I would have to find a new home, at least temporarily. The only family Mom and I had left was Nathan, her younger brother, the man I'd always thought was the kindest, most trustworthy person in the world. He'd lived in a small town a long time ago, married a woman named Dency, and I thought he was doing well. He was more than just an uncle, to me he was a true mentor, caring, wise, someone I could always count on. He taught me everything, how to ride a bike, how to change a light bulb, and even how to deal with a broken heart when I first experienced it as a teenager. And now, when the difficult moment came, he couldn't help but come to the rescue. I came to their house and thought it would be a temporary respite, a place where I could just finish my degree and decide what to do next. I'm studying to be a veterinarian, so I spend most of my time working part-time at the clinic or helping volunteers with homeless animals. Nathan and Dency agreed to take me in for a few months, and I wanted to believe that they accepted me willingly. But something was wrong from the start. Dency. It was hard to know what was going through her mind. She was a few years older than Nathan, and there was a tense, fragile connection between them. Sometimes I felt like they were almost strangers to each other. Dency was a beautiful woman, well-groomed, with a stern look and impeccable style. But the coldness emanating from her seemed to fill the whole house. She never yelled or made a scene, but every time I was alone in the room, I felt as if she were watching me, always a little distant, but always tense. It was as if my closeness to Nathan irritated her. After a while, a kind of distance formed between us. I respected her, tried to listen to her advice on household chores and the little things she tried to impose on me. And although our relationship could not be called friendly, I believed that sooner or later we will find a common language. And then I found out that I wasn't the only one who felt that icy gap between her and Nathan. Nathan was a warm man, and not just because he was my uncle. There was so much understanding and kindness in his gaze, so much patience. When I came to him with my doubts, worries, or just fatigue from endless studying, he always knew how to find the right words. He could listen for hours, never interrupting or judging, just nodding silently or asking for details to help me come to a decision. He was surprisingly easy and calm, as if he made it clear that everything could be overcome. Evenings with Nathan became something special to me. Dency was often away on business, and we'd be alone together. He'd put on some music, make some strong tea, and we'd talk. Sometimes he told stories from his youth, and I laughed, wondering how a man so humble and poised now could do such things. He gave me books, discussed difficult subjects with me, and never left me feeling like I was a burden to him. One night, when Dency was late again, I peeked into his room to talk to him. He looked tired, and I thought maybe I shouldn't bother him. But he saw me and invited me to sit down, and suddenly the conversation turned to his marriage. Nathan was honest. He admitted that his longtime relationship with Dency had been one of habit and shared past. There was no resentment or bitterness in his words, only a quiet, self-accepted reality. And yet at that moment I felt madly sorry for him. I could see him struggling to keep something that had long ago become a mere semblance. As the weeks went by, I could feel the tension between them more and more. Dency continued to scowl when she saw us together, throwing snide remarks even though I hardly ever left my room and tried to keep communication to a minimum. She was jealous of him, of everyone, of me especially, though to her it certainly looked like an attempt to maintain control over her husband. Her shadow lingered over us every night, poisoning all the rare warmth that was just beginning to brew between Nathan and me. But there came a day when Dency could no longer hide her dislike. She came up to me in the kitchen and talked about how I was in their way, that it was high time they thought about moving out, and that my affection for Nathan was too obsessive. Her cold voice and the bitterness of her words sobered me. I didn't know how to react, but I realized there was no truth in what she said anyway. I knew it was time for me to find my own way. And so, at this juncture, I decided I needed to leave, to keep the warm memories Nathan had given me all this time, and to keep this house from shattering completely, from succumbing to what was never meant to separate us. When Nathan entered the room, his face looked unexpectedly stern. I stood in the kitchen, hunched over under the weight of the words I'd just heard from Dency. She approached me directly, almost without lurking, and, in a reserved but cold manner, demanded I leave the house. "It's high time you left, Ali. You should realize that yourself," she said, her voice firm and strained and her gaze unyielding. I felt small and helpless, like a child, not knowing what to say. But before I could say anything, I saw a figure appear behind her. Nathan froze when he heard her words, and in his eyes I saw the pain that had been replaced by determination. He stepped forward and said with a firmness that was surprising, even shocking, to me, "Dency, stop it. This is our home, and I'm not going to let you talk to her like that." His voice was calm, but behind that calmness there was a tension that was hard to resist. Dency fell silent, her face pale. She looked at him, then at me, and I caught an almost resentment in her eyes, like betrayal. Without a word, she picked up her bag and walked out, slamming the door. In the silence that followed her departure, it was as if the whole house had stopped breathing. I froze, not knowing how to act. This moment when we were alone was like a viscous fog around us. Nathan stood at the door, his shoulders slightly slumped, as if he'd shed a heavy weight, and finally turned to me. There was no judgment or pity in his gaze, just a warm, calm confidence that made my heart beat even harder. "Ali, I'm sorry," he said softly, stepping closer. "I know this isn't easy for you. But you can always count on me," he added, and the words suddenly stirred deep, previously suppressed feelings in me. I tried to push away all the thoughts I shouldn't be having, but something was holding me here, next to him, not letting me back down. Our gazes met, and I felt an invisible, thin thread forming between us, the same thread that had united us all this time, hidden from view. It seemed that every casual glance or touch, every gesture, spoke for us more than words. He stepped a little closer, and I noticed his hand slowly reaching for mine, lightly touching my fingers as if checking to see if this was really happening. "It's going to be okay," he said quietly, as if he understood my thoughts, and I felt his calmness transfer to me. There was no smile on his face, but I could see the genuine warmth in his eyes that made me feel protected and, for a moment, loved. My mind contradicted my heart, saying it was wrong, that it shouldn't be this way. But this feeling, this attraction, this magnetism between us, it all existed, and it was real. When he let go of my hand, I felt my fingers shake slightly. Not wanting to disturb the moment, I took a few steps away, as if trying to put some distance between us. But being in this house, in this room, I realized that even distance couldn't erase the bond that had formed between us. I caught his gaze, and I saw that he realized it, too. "You don't have to feel guilty, Ali," he said, as if he'd read my mind. "It was me. I should have stopped it sooner. But like you, I was afraid to admit to myself that something had changed a long time ago." He didn't say more, and his words seemed to hang in the air, filling the room with the weight of their hidden meaning. I realized that I should leave, that right now it might be the only right thing to do. But I couldn't bring myself to look away, and I couldn't bring myself to walk away. We stood side by side, silent, letting this moment be, not disturbing its bustle with words or actions. Only our breathing, his and mine, seemed to fill that silence, and every breath, every slight sigh, was like a promise, inevitable, heavy, but so appealing. "You need to rest, Ali," he said suddenly, as if it would distract us both from the thoughts we both knew we were thinking. I nodded, feeling that unfulfilled emotion still throbbing inside me, and went to my room, feeling his gaze behind me and with it everything we hadn't had time to say to each other. My mind tried to resist, but my soul, my heart, everything in me wanted him. My mind tried to resist, but my soul, my heart, everything in me wanted him. I knew there was no turning back. The sensation of his presence, the soft sound of his breath, every tinge of his scent, it all pulled me to him, as if an invisible force had bound us together from the moment I'd settled here. Nathan sat next to me, his hand on the bed, and I felt his warmth, barely touching his fingers with mine. He was looking at me, and in his gaze, I thought I saw the same silent recognition. These feelings, forbidden and desperate, merged into one pulse, making us forget everything that had gone before. I tried to speak, to say it was wrong, but the words stuck in my throat. "You can always talk to me," he said quietly, his voice soft, but there was a faint hoarseness to it. He patted the seat next to him, inviting me to sit down. As if in a trance, I took a step toward him and sat down, feeling the air between us grow tighter, more tense. My hand trembled as I casually touched him, and he noticed it. His eyes met mine, and in that instant I realized I had no doubts left. Those few seconds seemed like an eternity. His gaze was scrutinizing and penetrating, and the spark I'd caught earlier was now clear and unmistakable. I knew that if I didn't stop now, I'd be on the brink of no turning back. But I was ready. I leaned toward him and felt him slowly move toward me, and suddenly his hand was softly on my cheek. He touched me gently, as if giving me a final warning, a chance to pull back. But in that instant, I realized clearly that I wasn't leaving. Never. I would stay here, next to him, no matter what. Slowly, as if fighting myself, I looked up, and our gazes met. At first the kiss was a light, barely perceptible touch, like a subtle hint of what lurked in our hearts. But after a moment, the touch became deep, like a rapidly burning fire. Everything around us disappeared, leaving only us two souls bound by something irresistible, even if it was wrong. When I finally pulled away, my lips were still trembling and tears were in my eyes. He gently brushed a strand of hair away from my face and looked at me with a kind of sad understanding. He seemed to realize the same thing I did: we couldn't exist without each other. Even though it was a secret that would have to be hidden from the world, I wasn't going to back down. "I don't want you to leave," he said softly, barely touching my hand, "but you know this is dangerous." I nodded, but there wasn't the same shyness in my gaze. It was my firm decision, the choice I'd made in that moment. I was willing to stay, no matter what happened. I won't leave now. I will be here for him and for him, willing to do anything. Yes, it might seem crazy, but I was more determined than ever. "She has to go," I whispered, looking into his face. "We should be together, just us. You deserve to be happy." The words hung in the air, but he didn't respond. Instead, his gaze grew colder, he pulled away, and there was a shadow of detachment on his face, as if he'd just realized something I'd realized long ago. The silence became scalding, and I suddenly felt small and vulnerable. He opened his mouth to say something, but that's when the front door slammed. In the dim light of the nightlight, Dency stood in the doorway. Her gaze was cold and piercing, and I could tell by the look on her face that she'd heard everything.